kwenye Salam TV.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear viewer, welcome to yet another episode of the Al-Hidayah show that comes to you every Monday, 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. My name is Muhammad Sekalala, your host for the show. And in this episode, we usually look at Islam and science, latest trends in science, technology, and how they impact and affect our lives as Muslims. Today is the 4th of Dhul Hajj. The year is 1445, corresponding to the 10th of June 2024. We want to welcome you again and thank those that are so far doing that is needed as Muslims in these first 10 days of Dhul Hajj. Those that are fasting, we pray that Allah enables you to complete the fasting. And if you've not yet started the business of fasting, at least make it a point to fast the 9th day, which will be the Saturday of this week, Yawm al-Arafah. Of course, that will be a discussion for the mainstream Dawah programs, but to remind you that this show can always go as a recap on the Salam YouTube page. Type Salam, Al-Hidayah, Islam and Science, and then you'll be getting a recap of all the shows we had in the past. Today, we are looking at a very important aspect that directly affects our lives, and that's the genetically modified products. To join us and help understand and appreciate this topic, we are joined by Sekalema Hamza, a lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda. I request him to say salam to the viewers.
Our dear viewers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We thank Allah and ask Him to guide us as we live our lives as Muslims within the contemporary challenges. Knowledge is the key to nearly everything, so as we build a better understanding of our world and the way it interacts with the Sharia, we hope to be better Muslims on a day-to-day basis.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much. So viewer, just step back and follow the discussion. So Mr. Hamza, for starters, normally we want to begin with the people who are in the not know of the topics that we have. When you talk about genetically modified products, what should the viewer appreciate as first principle?
Okay, genetically modified food. We are essentially talking of food for today.
Yes.
There are other things that can be genetically modified.
Okay.
Now remember, we have been looking at the issue of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates whatever He creates.
Okay.
Some time back we looked at atoms, other times we talk of DNA. So what happens is that when Allah is creating any creature, He has a certain, what we can call a template. So that template is what we call genetic material, some kind of definition of how this creature will behave. Whatever attributes it has is encoded in some kind of chemical format.
Yes.
So each encoding has an impact on how the creature will finally turn out. For example, what color it may be, how long it takes to grow up, etc. All of these are things that are part of the description of the genetic makeup of a certain entity that Allah has created.
MashaAllah, yes.
So what happens is that the scientists now begin to look at this genetic code. With the advent of very good computers nowadays, they are able to run some decompilation, and finally they can be able to easily identify that this code here is the one that handles the part of growth rate.
Yes, please.
This code here is the one that handles color. So they can be able to segregate out these codes.
Yes, please.
So when we talk of modification now, it means they now begin to modify.
Yes.
With some justification. And I needed us to first look at a hadith.
Hadith, yeah.
So that we can look at whether there is any essence to genetic modification from an Islamic scientific view, because for us we are looking at these issues as Islamic scientists,
Islamic
people
scientists.
that believe that science is a very positive force, but we don't go overboard into domain that is unnecessary just because we are using a form of reasoning that is not correct.
Okay.
Now in the 40th hadith of Nawawi, the number 4
hadith
talks about the way we are compiled within the mother's womb.
Yes, please.
We shall not go into the text a lot. So this hadith comes from Abdurrahman
Ibn Mas'ud.
ibn Mas'ud.
Yes.
So he says, Inna ahadakum yujma'u khalquhu fi batni ummihi arba'ina yawman.
Yawman, yes.
Not far. So for 40 days you are not far. And the hadith goes ahead and mentions the other stages that we may not talk about. But the part we are very interested in,
yes, please,
is the last part where an angel is sent. ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر بأربع كلمات.
Yes.
So this angel does two things. In this bloody thing, he blows the ruh, which is essentially the soul part of this human being. Then he writes some 4 things about this creature that is going to be created.
Okay.
So, what are the 4? Bikatabi, okay, Arba. The first one, Ajalihi.
Lifespan.
Ajali is how long you live.
The total lifespan.
The other one is the Amalihi. In fact, the first one is Rizqihi.
That is
Rizqi
provision.
is provision.
Provision, yes.
And we are more interested in part of Rizqi. So this angel writes 4 things. There is Rizqihi, there is the Amalihi, what he's going to be doing, whether he's going to be a good person or a bad one. But the principle we are looking at is the issue of rizq.
Provision.
Now, these modifications that are done, they are based on a certain atheistic thinking that ultimately, as the human population grows, we are going to reach a point where the human population has exceeded the food availability, and we begin to simply die of due to
that
hunger.
was economics.
Malthus theory.
Yes,
now Malthus in those early days, he was imagining that people are becoming too many, so there's going to be, but in the end, Allah has provided. Agricultural technology has grown. There are many varieties of food that have come up, and all of this is a guarantee that we have within this hadith, that before you are even fully grown as a human being, everything you eat is clearly documented by that angel that establishes your existence within your mother's womb. So for us, therefore, we don't worry to the level of doomsday thinking that ultimately this food is going to be to be completed before the human beings, and in the end we shall simply fall off and die. No, we don't believe in that. So therefore, as we go into methods of improving food yield, we don't reach the level of going into harmful methods. As we shall see, we bring all these controversial technologies because ultimately there's a harmful part to it, and the ones who do it simply ignore the harmful part, claiming that the positive part is better. But for us, we insist that if everyone's risk is already guaranteed, there is no need to go into a technology that involves harmful elements that can injure the person merely because we are trying to guarantee food availability. Because food availability is already guaranteed by Allah.
By Allah,
It is not we that guarantee food availability.
Okay.
So, what do they therefore do? Like we have seen, after identifying the various elements that form the parts of this, for example, maize or rice or etc., they now begin to modify. For example, here they show us what they can do to build a tomato plant that is resistant to insects. So some of the intention appears to be fine. So what they do, they find an already existing tomato plant, then they identify the part that deals with fighting off insect infestations and etc. Then they infuse some other artificially created content to make sure that the final tomato that you see there is not a normal tomato. It is able to resist the effects of insects.
Insects, yes.
So what is the purpose of that? It means if I plant my tomatoes, I don't have to worry about spraying and etc., which is also another chemical problem that tends to affect our food. So ultimately, you can see that the intention is fine, and the intention may actually be offsetting some of the other bad things that occur in the agricultural sector, because when they are trying to fight insects, they again use some very dangerous chemicals on these tomatoes, and they could possibly impact on us as human beings. Actually, in some other countries, like in the EU, you don't just walk in with your pesticide full tomatoes into their country. They order you to first give the tomato some kind of period to renaturalize. You've been putting a lot of poisonous content to kill insects and other things, so they force you to give at least a month or it is for the tomato.
It's not like us in Uganda, right from the garden.
For us, even the person can, in actual sense, this dangerous chemical you put into kill insect, definitely it goes into the tomato. But the tomato regenerates over time, so if you can give it like a week,
sometimes even say tomato
regenerate,
developing some whitish substance on, and actually it reminds me also there are these nets that are disputed for malaria. People are told, please put it in the sun for is it a week? But very few people do that.
Exactly, so because if the one that created the net has warned you that this thing can be a problem, but to remove the problem, simply put it in the sun, so that the other chemical elements that are within it can decompose. Well, imagine those nets are brought in for an entire country. So how do they store them in such a way that they don't get damaged? Of course, they put in some chemical elements to kill off. So ultimately, you have to obey the protocol that is provided for you. So ultimately, modifying this plant to resist insects can be a good intention, but we have to watch out for some of the other things, because for us, we follow the Makaswidi Sharia. If there is anything that injures human life, it becomes something that we should not permit, except if there is dire need in that we are balancing against two bad things.
There's also an argument that is normally put up that the genetic modification is done to reduce on the cost of production. So that stand as a valid point. Now,
reducing the cost of the production to benefit who? Because you may find
the producer.
You may find agriculture is essentially done on a commercial basis.
Commercial basis, yes.
Once I produce these mangoes, for example, that I've modified, you'll find that the person has incurred way less cost in the production of this mango after doing some genetic modification, but at the destination he leaves the same price.
Same price.
So meaning, meaning the intention is not really of any benefit to the rest of mankind, but it's just to build a profit for this individual. Here they give us some examples of foods that have been modified. You'll find tomatoes. Some of them are not on an industrial scale. There are some tests that are still running because, of course, because of the potential dangers that are there they tend to restrict the way it is applied to commercial.
It's a work in progress.
But you can see there are many sugar beets. Some of them are 100% nowadays. You have over 90% of what you see in the field is all GM. Soya, peas, and etc. We shall look at some of the problems. So in this industry of genetic modification, what are their major areas of focus? The benefits that come out of it.
Okay.
Benefit number one is attractiveness. For example, we human beings tend to be attracted by good-looking things, even for food purposes. In case you saw some banana that is very yellow and appearing good, it tends to
actually of late there are bigger mangoes, bigger oranges than the small sizes.
Meaning instead of you eating this kataine mango that appears with some black dots,
that is about a full kg.
If a person brings you some very beautiful looking mango, there is not even a dot on it. There is a way you feel better about it. So they go into this GM just to improve the appearance. Or in some cases, to remove some elements. For example, they may fight the number of seeds that are there
by the way, you find that most of the oranges today, you cut and then you can count a seed.
There's hardly a seed because they no longer need the seeds. By GM, they even engineer the way this plant actually comes into being. So it's not, it does not no longer, it no longer depends on the natural way of propagation. Already the propagation is artificial in nature. So attractiveness can be one way. The other one is avoiding waste.
Avoiding waste, yes.
Exactly. So in this case, for example, you can produce foods that are more resistant to herbicides. So in that case, you reduce on the need to control weeds. Then there are also resistance to viruses. There is also resistance to insects. So all of these things that reduce on the total waste that comes, because when you plant your seeds, weeds can come in and essentially destroy the entire plantation, or insects can come and destroy the plantation, all these other elements. So in that case, each destroyed plant comes out as a form of waste, because you can no longer use it. And here they simply do some re-engineering to make sure that this plant will exist and it will not be affected by any of the nearby.
So how is that different from
factors.
recycling? Because I don't know whether it is a value chain creation. Of, for example, there's a famous pineapple farmer we know in the country. Now, in the past, he would harvest many sacks of the pineapple. But of course, you know, it is a perishable.
Yeah, it's a very perishable.
But now
product.
he was advised that no, you can get the tomato and then dry it and then have it packaged. Is it also part of the whole process of GMO, or just a
No,
different
now that
process?
one is not really modifying the genetic makeup. There you are simply
Adding value to the.
you add value by changing the format. For example, in order for you to distribute it over a long period, you remove whatever water that there is
yes.
and it becomes more of a dry element that can exist for a longer period compared to the wet one. So in that case, you are not really tampering with the format of the product. You are simply removing something like water, which is a natural part of that product. And the imagination is that whenever you put it back into water, it will sip the water and become a normal pineapple once again. So in that case, there is no problem. Because for as long as, of course, you are not again applying chemical modification during the drying.
So it's just slicing them and then.
You are just changing the way that product is being delivered to the market.
I think the same has also been done for matoke, of powdered matoke. Of
exactly, to try and increase longevity. Because actually, for most of these crops, you'll find that whenever the farmers produce them in very large quantities, they end up becoming a liability. People even lose their money because you, for example, if you are having your tomatoes, they have a certain very few days in which they can exist without damage. So the one that is buying from you can very easily squeeze you by saying, if you want, you can stay with your
box that was 120,000, I give you 60.
It ends up dropping. So meaning, if you can find a way of increasing the longevity of this tomato, then you can also be able to squeeze the trader and tell him, okay, you go with your money. I don't want. In case you can
convert it to another.
In case you can turn it into something else that can push you ahead for another 2 months, you have a better bargaining power.
So as we are going for the break, we can have one more.
The other thing is about nutritional value.
Nutritional value.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala measures the nutritional value that he puts into a mango, he puts into an orange, and these are some of the things we worry about. Yes, the scientists could come and say, okay, the protein value or the vitamin value of this orange is at this rate, but I can just make a modification on this genetic part and it increases the vitamin value. So he may reason it in that way, claiming that we need vitamins everywhere. People are getting sick over some of these diseases. So
the shortage of vitamins.
If we can increase vitamin output, then even the impact of the fruits, because we are encouraged very much to eat fruits. And part of the rationale is vitamin. So the person may reason and say, instead of you eating a whole 10 mangoes or 10 oranges,
one that
I can just squeeze this entire thing into one orange. You chew one orange and you get the entire vitamin content. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has measured the composition of these things, and he is not just guessing these quantities. So before you begin to modify, you need to really be careful about the final product that you are trying to come up with.
Okay, mashallah. Thank you very much. Dear viewer, we are looking at controversial technologies vis-a-vis Islam, and today we are looking at genetically modified foods, where we say that Allah has made all creations he has made with a specific genetic material or template that shouldn't be distorted. But with advances in research and technology, some of these are being modified, of course, for the reasons that our guest here has shed light upon. So inshallah, we shall be continuing the discussion after this short break.
Eno ye Salam TV.
You used to tell me that I don't make you happy. All that time you would be complaining. I'll call you every day, yeah yo, baby dondolo.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000 or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21 hash and select daily or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
I'm one of the scientists now doing research on plastic technology recycling, where we can be able to produce other products from plastic waste. For example, we are trying to develop a plastic tile with sand plastic tile, that it is unbreakable, it can be shifted from one roof to another. So this is a project we are working on. It's our initiative as Kazire Group of trying to reduce waste from the environment. Brothers and sisters, Taso Butonde for a better Uganda.
This message is brought to you by National Environment Management Authority, Kampala Capital City Authority, Vivo Energy, Airco, Pepsi, Stanbic Bank and NBS TV. Better steady, be better.
Ha, bade manyiko gano kwate simu yange semakula ninga mwana wo ku kyalo gwe twakola naye
waganira ddala okutereeza okutuweereza ssente tutereeza essimu yo kati layini yo tugenda gitemako.
Tamanyi munange naye nanti mbadde nkuweereza ssente ku simu yo by mistake.
munagaranga onesima sitokunyusuka Josephat omuntu owasomera nawo mu primary school ono landlord.
Of course, many of them will come in that direction. I hear obis, chokanga wakola ne homeschooling. Boy, your landlord. Most of your landlords are still your parents. But now in this particular era and season, most of the scammers are doing their best to earn what you have. So better steady, be better. Boss in this steady.
TUBA in partnership with Uganda Communications Commission, Equity Bank, Momo, United Media, MTN, Stanbic Bank, and NBS.
The government of Uganda, in collaboration with the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, welcomes you to the Global Symposium for Regulators, GSR 24, taking place at the Speak Resort and Convention Center Munyonyo in Kampala from July 1st to 4th, 2024. The Global Symposium for Regulators is an annual event organized by the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. The GSR brings together 700 international delegates, including the world's telecommunication and information communication technology regulators, policymakers, and industry stakeholders. Let's work together to promote regulation for impact. Welcome to GSR 24 Kampala. Eno ye Salam TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear viewer, we welcome you from the short break. This is the show that comes to you every Monday, 3 o'clock to 4. My name is Muhammad Sekalala. We are looking at Islam and science, and specifically genetically modified foods. Before we went for the break, we were looking at some of the considerations that are made by scientists, by the researchers, why we need to have these genetically modified foods, and some of the reasons: attractiveness. You feel nice and cool to have a bigger mango than the ordinary small mangoes we always have, and many other benefits as are being shared by our guest here. So inshallah, we shall be continuing from where we ended. So what are some of the other considerations we have for having these genetically modified foods?
Now, of course, some of the other considerations could be things like reducing bulk.
Reducing bulk, yes.
So you may find, for example, matoke. If you look at the total output after peeling.
After peeling, yes.
Versus the peels that you've removed, you may find the two nearly are of the same size, or this one is like half of. So meaning you carry that entire waste. Of course, it is used as animal feed after some time, so it may not be 100% waste, but for the one who has no animal, essentially it becomes a form of waste. So if I can genetically modify that matoke to reduce considerably the size of that
the pills
so that it only occupies a very small layer on top. Or even when I'm peeling, I just take off a small part. All those can be justifications of why we need to modify. You want to reduce bulk, make sure the thing is all usable, and so many other justifications. And in places like Uganda, where we don't really mind about the way we dump our waste, people may not worry a lot about the volume of waste. But in other countries, you don't just walk and keep dumping your waste around. You
in Uganda even have stray animals that will come and clear the
so that one is another justification that can be. Of course, the part of sweetness, I think they have not really found, because in many of these modified fruits and etc., you find the sweetness drops considerably, possibly because of the modification of the size. So the concentration of sweetness tends to drop. But for them, they look more in terms of general utility. Of course, here in Uganda, we have very good fruits actually. If we were a sensitive country, would market our fruits on the basis of how sweet they are. Because in other countries, if you went and tried to eat some bogoya, you'd find you are eating some totally unsweet thing, or even pineapple. Here we know it as a strongly sweet material. Everyone knows Ofene and some of the others.
Actually, the recent visit by Mufti Bank, I remember when I was at Makere, he said, Ugandans, wallah, you don't know that you're gifted. The bananas you have here, the pineapples.
Everything is especially sweet. And we have a variety. It's not that we are having. I had my studies in Bangladesh for the master's degree, and they were calling jackfruit a national fruit. Can you believe they even didn't actually accept that that fruit exists anywhere else? So they were saying this fruit is only here, and it's our national fruit. So, but here, Fene is even looked at.
Do they even gazette it as a national treasure?
They call it a national fruit, that jackfruit in Bangladesh.
Just like we have a crested cream.
That jackfruit is honored as a national fruit, but here in Uganda, it is just a simple. But of course, given our very good land, some of these fruits are not native, essentially as African fruits. They were brought by the Indians and some of the other people that came to work on the railway.
I told the pineapples were brought by Portuguese.
Yes, so you'd find, because our soil is essentially compatible with anything, whether you come from another continent and you just plant it.
Though we are still wondering why the dates have not yet come to Uganda.
I think the dates have a very special connection with that Medina.
And even apples, I'm told there are a few areas.
Only they need very cold environments, so that's why they are mainly in the western part.
That's the Muslim favorite.
I think people have not put in maybe an effort, but if they sat down and really.
Ugandan scientists kindly do research for us and see how we
because this country has been able to grow anything, rice,
everything, but dates have really
not come here. Maybe it is a dua from Ibrahim, but
let it be in the Middle East specifically.
He gave it as a risk for those people. Okay. So we now go into the negative parts, because these negative parts are what the Sharia comes to contest.
Yes.
If a negative injures life, a negative influences the way we live in such a way that it injures any of our five, what we call makas in the Sharia,
five objectives,
we refuse that kind of technology. So injury number one is the issue of allergy.
Allergies.
Now allergy is some kind of a negative reaction of the body's immune system to something that we may consume.
Okay.
Many people have allergies against meat, Others have allergies against particular plants. So during this process of genetic modification, in some cases they do cross elements from one plant to another because they are trying to import a certain trait within this plant, try to merge it with this one and make it better. So in that case, that crossing over can very easily make the final product to cause allergies, although originally the natural form does not cause. So that is one risk. You are mixing up these things, but a person may be allergic to the small modification you are adding into this large one. On the surface, it appears like a mango, but it is a mango that has had some element of another fruit which a person is allergic to, and it causes allergy in this final product, which on the surface looks like a mango.
Yes.
And for those who know the impact of allergies, it is a sometimes very dangerous thing. There was one time we visited a professor that was having a problem with the sulfur. You know, there are some people that don't mix very well with the sulfur.
Yes.
So he had sulfur, tabs containing sulfur given to him for some sickness. And he had warned the nurse, but the nurse, I think, didn't listen. So he ended up being all burnt. The entire body had major injuries. So you should not be playing around with the allergies. So the modification can therefore result into allergies, and that's actually the World Health Organization pronounces itself in that area. It totally discourages the use of DNA, things that are known to cause allergies.
Yes.
So that is one area that can cause a problem. So for as long as this modification can result in allergies that have a negative impact on the people to the level of threatening life, we say no, leave
so how about
the material the way it was.
They have what we call, they put precautionary statements on the packs
and warn you that please don't eat this.
If you know you're allergic to this kind of elements, please do not.
I think those precautionary packs would be similar to, for example, a warning that alcohol consumption can be harmful to your...
Don't drink and drive.
That kind of warning, the intention is just to appear to have warned the person, but
in the actual sense, you know
very well that no one is going to read that thing. The person simply sees that this is a fruit juice.
So the onus is on the manufacturer, the one that is doing
this.
Yes,
you simply don't produce, because if you are calling it mango, for example, no one is going to read a lot of detail about a mango.
They're inscribed in very tiny
fonts. So you don't think that because you wrote somewhere in font size 1 that this mango contains...
Everyone will be that...
Of course, legally, the person might not sue you since you have put the logo, but it is not something good. So for us, we may, from a Sharia position, simply refuse that kind of modification for as long as we see that it injures the life of an individual. So allergic reactions are one thing. And the other problem is the issue of cancer.
Cancers. Talk about that because of rates. There are so many forms of cancer.
Cancer, what is cancer? Cancer is essentially some abnormally growing cells within the person's body. That is all. And these cells can have gotten this abnormal growth from the modifications you made to the original plant or whatever fruit that you were trying to modify. And it is clear, even the American Cancer Society, the American Cancer Society, for them, they say there is no evidence that GMO is known to either increase or reduce. For them, when they talk of no evidence, they mean hardcore scientific evidence that requires research.
But at least...
but for as long as there is a worry, we may discourage people from being consuming this kind of potentially dangerous. Because cancer, for now, there's not been much of what can be called medicine for cancer.
Of course.
Although, of course, the Cancer Institute has its interventions. For example, they will give you some chemotherapy, and it sometimes removes the cancer after some time. Then also radiography or radiotherapy, it also reduces. So there are some interventions that can be made, but we all know very well the cost that is involved and etc. So it's not something that if you can avoid, you would go directly into. The other problem is antibacterial resistance. Now remember that our bodies are usually negatively impacted by bacteria.
Yes.
And in order to handle those bacteria, we use what we call antibacterial medicine.
Yes, please.
Now, when you eat a lot of these modified products, in some cases they affect the way your body utilizes these antibacterial drugs. So a time comes when even if you take a whole ton of antibacterial drugs, you find that there is nothing. And how does the antibacterial thing come into being? Inside you have this bacteria. You are chewing this genetically modified food, and it is slowly preparing these bacteria that are within your body of the existence of certain particular materials.
Yes.
So a time comes when you now bring one of these already existing things that has the bacteria have been interacting with, and you are bringing it as something that is intended to kill the bacteria. But remember, the bacteria have already gotten used to this particular content, and it ends up not being effective against the bacteria, because just like the way we do immunization, bring a weak form of that virus, put it within the body identifies it, builds a mechanism against it, so that when the real virus comes, the body is already aware that this is a problem, you deal with it in this way. So even the bacteria can be easily modified by the existence of some of these materials, in that when you come with your antibacterial drug, you find it no longer works, because they have also adapted due to the existence of some of this content within the food that you have been eating on a day-to-day basis.
The other time when we looked at the genetic engineering bit of it, we talked about mutants. Is this the same concept here that we are looking at?
So the mutants could come in the next point. They are telling us that with that modification that you keep manipulating with the plants, you may end up again changing human DNA. And whenever you change human DNA, you don't know what is going to come up, because Allah Himself has warned us that so although we appear to be having some knowledge and we can do some modifications, the real understanding of what you are actually doing is not really reliable. You don't know the final product. You are just modifying and checking. But you don't know. And in some cases, some of these effects actually do come after some time. So when you are doing your research, you run an impact test for maybe 6 months, and you see there is no impact. Yet in actual sense, the thing has an impact period of like 4 years. So you will test even 1 year, you're not seeing any problem. You pass it as very good. Everyone begins to consume. But 4 years later, the thing begins now to have its impact. So we are limited in the way we human beings are. But all these precautions we are saying, for as long as any of these is established to occur with a certain genetically modified material, that material becomes prohibited for us as Muslims. Then the other negative thing is about what they are calling toxicity for body organs.
Toxicity.
Now, toxicity here, they are saying that we can have a toxicity impact in liver, kidney, pancreas, and the reproduction systems.
Problems might come.
So for all of these, they are saying there is no major evidence that is scientific in nature, but whenever there is suspicion, be aware that potentially this can be something that can occur. So these are all elements that we look out for within. Then the other problem that could arise is actually something about monopoly in food technology. Now remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this food available to us in nearly unlimited ways. The matoke can be found in Mbale, Mbarara, Masaka. So there is no area that can monopolize that particular food and even cause others to suffer just because of that. You know very well that food has been used as a weapon of war in this Gaza Strip and other places. You simply hold back food, and if you are not killing the people directly, it has an impact on the other side, both psychological and in the physical. So here, a company establishes a modified form of, for example, a modified form of, for example, maize. What are the advantages of this artificially modified maize? It grows very fast, does not need any weeding for as long as you put it in. Then it survives in very harsh environment, even under very small amounts of rain for it, it can be able to survive. You see? So in that case, the company now patents, because this is now intellectual property. Once they patent, For you to access, you have to buy from them. Unfortunately, some go ahead and prevent the seeds that have been genetically modified from being able to generate new plants, meaning you can't grow their maize and pick a seed out of it and put it back in the ground.
So it's a one-time use.
So in that case, it becomes a monopoly over food. Now you cannot really do a monopoly over food for a normal company. This is a company that can have immense control over the lives of people, and that one is not something that we are willing. It is a potential threat to the human beings, although commercially it is an advantage for them. But anything that involves manipulating food to the level that one individual or one corporation has now full control over this food, whoever needs the food must go only to them. That one is not something that we can support, since it has too many negatives compared to the benefits that come therefrom. But commercially, it makes a lot of sense. If you have your maize and you are the only one that should sell the seeds, you can't even begin selling the seeds at very high prices. Some rice that costs so you could do something like that. But that's what we're saying. Not agreeable.
You don't monopolize something. Okay. Thank you very much. Viewer, you've been a very wonderful audience from where we started. We are looking at Islam and science and genetically modified foods. In the beginning part, we are looking at the arguments for genetically modified foods. They bring attractiveness, they reduce on the waste that we could have in the different products or fruits that we are producing. But also, when you flip the coin the other side, there are arguments against. And largely, that's where the Sharia is interested to see how we either mitigate, minimize, or completely do with the same. For example, the modified foods have an effect of causing cancers. We have an upsurge of cancer cases in the world, but partly because of perhaps the impact of these genetically modified foods. So it means if we can avoid this, if the scientists can continuously make endeavors to see that they minimize and mitigate the risks and the dangers that come out of these modified foods, perhaps the Sharia could give them a window to see that the production continues. But we could see that largely the discussion is we need to see how we reduce and minimize on the genetically modified foods. Mr. Sekam, as we are winding up in about 2-3 minutes, what will be the message for the Muslim as a consumer? You know, we love things that are trending, things that are hype, things that are... so to the Muslim, what precaution, what efforts should they make as regards to this genetically modified food?
Okay, now the good thing is that here in Uganda, the modifications are not usually the complicated kind that involve a lot of very micro modification of plant structures. They tend to do their work more in terms of natural means of modification. For example, combining oranges and mangoes, but in a natural way.
Grafting.
Grafting. For example, when you do that kind of thing, you are not really tampering too much with the way this plant actually behaves, because even the way it integrates, the plant itself is the one managing that process. So you may find it eliminates some of the negatives that occur as compared to you manually putting things in there. It means you are now directly interfering with the way this plant is established. Then two, here we don't have a lot of GM material, but in the US things are really very, very high. Now, for example, they have sugar beet. Sugar beet is what they use for creating sugar in the US. They don't do a lot of growing sugarcane like what we have here. But they are talking of 99.9% sugar beet in the US is GMO, meaning in that case you don't even need to do any research. The thing is all GMO. Then they also have soya bean. Soya bean is 94% GMO in the US. Corn, kasori, is 92%. And cotton seed oil is 96%. You can see the entire industry is now covered by some of these GMO.
So then how does the ordinary Ugandan know that this is GMO
So for the ordinary Ugandan, maybe you are now sure that anything coming from the US is potential.
Do they normally
GMO.
indicate on the packs?
Of course, they say made in the US. But by then nowadays, we don't import things from the US. I don't know whether it's a pricing issue, but I remember in our day, cooking oil used to come
from the US. There were
in,
those metallic cans.
I love them very well. So those ones used to come from there, and they were made out of
and they would describe made in the US.
Very clearly. But nowadays we don't have a lot of those. But of course, some could come from Europe. But the good thing, we have a lot of local content in terms of food, and the majority of it is not GM, because the technology needed for GM is also quite advanced and complicated. So the worry may not be there. But definitely, since we live in a global market, you will go to some place and bring a product,
especially the ones who are traveling a lot.
So we encourage you to be cautious about some of these things, because you could be injured by the very food that you are eating in order to maintain life.
There's need for someone, take some seconds off to read
a bit. And in these countries where there is GMO, they tend to force them to very properly label, so that one who wants organic, because in those countries there are even people who don't want that GM modification. They insist we want organic food. And the organic food also ends up getting an advantage of better pricing, because it exists in very small quantities. So you need to label. For them, the issue of declaration is the principle. You declare that this thing is GMO, so that the one consuming,
traveling Ugandan,
I am able to easily identify that this is modified, so that I only eat it at my own risk. Otherwise, we have the technology, but we control it Islamically in case we are to control it on the basis of not injuring life. We don't accept anything that injures life, in the name of technology or in the name of
and to the
being
Muslims,
modern.
should be extra careful, because there are some haram components that could be
By the way, you've brought in something very interesting, because I could get pig DNA and I'm making it as part of a chicken, because I want this chicken to grow a bit faster and to have more fat. That kind of crossovers.
They have special codes they usually
they indicate, because the issue of declaration for them is very important. You don't just make people eat things that they don't understand. You clearly indicate what you have used. So that should be our bottom line. Be careful about what you eat. Any food that injures your life, whether highly technologically modified or whatever, we don't accept that kind of risking, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already guaranteed you what you will eat. You don't need to over-innovate to the level of injuring your life in the name of sustaining yourself. It is all guaranteed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Thank you very much, dear guest. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for the time and resources expended to share with us this information. To the viewer, we also want to appreciate you for keeping it with us from where we started up to the last minutes of the show. We hope that you've appreciated something. Bottom line is, as a Muslim, your life is guided by the Quran and Sunnah, the Sharia principles that require you to be careful whatever you put in your mouth, whatever you use as part of your daily errand. Kindly make it a point for us to read. We travel, those of us that are traveling a lot, you go to the West, you go to the different countries of the world, make it a point, before you make use of this product, make it a point to read, such that you don't land into the negative side of these GMOs. We've seen the cancers, the allergies. You eat something and then it will affect your life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and enable us become better persons. Remember, this show can be got as a recap on the Salam TV YouTube page. You type Salam TV, and then you can view, like, and share with your colleagues, such that they also get the information. By the way, I need to report that people are following the show. One of the days, deep in the night time, calls me, there was something I saw you posted in the groups about genetically modified content. Can you please help me look for that content and share? And alhamdulillah, I appreciate that people are literally following this. So thank you very much for those of that are following the show. Till next time, we want to wish you a very nice week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
eno ye Salam TV.